Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. This is another episode of Premier League predictions. Of course, the international break is now over and we move in to Premier League match day week 4. 8 games will take place on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. I'm joined by special guest and channel regular Gareth McGuiness, as per usual, as we will be predicting the scores for match week 4. Now, we're live on YouTube, we're live on Facebook and X, so please do get involved. Let us know your score predictions as we talk about each game. Gareth, how are you? Have you enjoyed the international break?
I knew you were going to ask me that. It's been a miserable break if you're an Ireland football supporter. We battled back from a 2-0 down to Hungary to get a 2-2 draw, which wasn't too bad, but we were at home. But then we play the lowest ranked team in the group, Armenia, away, 105th ranked in the world, and somehow lose the game 2-1. Our lowest defeat in a competitive game, they ranked team. It was Cyprus in 2006. They were 102nd in the world, and now it is Armenia, an all-time low, Chris, for Republic of Ireland.
I didn't do that on purpose, by the way. I promise. Two wins for England, 2-0, 5-0, routine stuff, 7 goals scored, 2 clean sheets.
Was impressive.
Pretty
Serbia
good.
Was a very impressive, very impressive performance.
Yeah. Right. Gareth, let's get down to business because, as we know, these shows can go on for some time because me and you love talking football. We love talking about the Premier League. There is a huge game that kicks off the weekend on Saturday. Arsenal take on Nottingham Forest. The big talking point about this game is Ange Postecoglou is back in the Premier League. Are you surprised by his appointment? What have you made of the press conference ahead of this trip to the Emirates? What a game for him to start. He's not on a Forest career. Of course, Nuno Espirito Santo has gone out the door. Things always happen in an international break, but, you know, 2 former Spurs bosses, Nuno out the door, Ange Postecoglou in the door. First of all, let's get your reaction to that change. And how do you think Ange is going to do?
Well, Chris, it's an absolute baptism of fire for me. Ange, former Spurs manager, wins the trophy. First game away at Arsenal. I mean, it's a fixture that, you know, maybe a week ago, looking at that game, it's not the most appealing game to start the weekend because you think it's going to be a very defensive Nottingham Forest under Nuno going there, trying to keep Arsenal to a minimum and then maybe trying to hit them in the counter-attack. And they may well have frustrated Arsenal in that game, but I think with Ange coming in, before we even talk about on the pitch, but off the pitch, I mean, I don't want to compare him to Jose Mourinho, but Chris, there is something about his press conferences when he sits down, everybody wants to watch them. He has box office in front of the camera. And, you know, if it had been anyone else, and I don't mean this, they disrespect Nottingham Forest because they're a big, big club. My grandfather supported them. But that press conference was massive today because of Ange. And it's hard to believe that maybe 3 years ago, no one really knew who he was in England until he came on the Spurs. I know Celtic fans will know him, but even when he got the Celtic job, nobody really knew in Scotland who he was. And now he's like a big, big character in the English game and worldwide, you'd have to say. I mean, even the Europa League was putting up. Great to see Big Ange back. Can he do it again? So, you know, there's a real excitement about the appointment. In terms of the actual appointment itself, Chris, I think Nuno was always going to be vulnerable, like you mentioned, on the international break. You know, Forest were never going to make a change when there was an international break coming up. I think they were trying to get until the break. And if you listen to Ange's press conference today, it seems as if the decision was pretty much made last week. They were going to replace Nuno. And a bit like us with Pochettino during the international break, he was sacked on the Tuesday night and Mourinho was in place on the Wednesday morning. So they'd obviously been speaking to Ange, and when they knew it was done, Nuno got the sack, and the next day, of course, Ange as the new manager. And Chris, to be honest, I'm just buzzing. They see Big Ange back. I think it gives not just, obviously, we have an affiliation being a Spurs fan, but I think Premier League football fans, and that's what this show is all about, Chris, that we do. It's not just about Tottenham, it's about Premier League fans, and I think Ange coming back will definitely excite Premier League fans.
I was going to say that the Premier League needs entertainers, and Ange is definitely an entertainer. But in terms of the football, because I've seen online, and there are a number of questions in the press conference, of course, with Ange. You know, people are doubting him already. Can he win a trophy? Can he be successful at Forest?
Chris, I think he loves that. I think he's like, write me off at your peril, doubt me all you want. I think he buzzes off that. At times he was frustrated last year, of course, the injuries and the questions, and he was getting annoyed. But I still think that he loved and relished the challenge of I'm going to prove everyone, including some Spurs fans, wrong. And I see the immediate reaction, Chris, of some of the Nottingham Forest fans, and I suppose it's only natural because of how well Nuno done. But it's a completely different style of play. They've seen the league form of Spurs last year and how kamikaze it was at times, and they think, well, maybe he just got lucky at Spurs, that he just, was it a weak Europa League, that he beat a poor Man United team in the final. But he won, and Forest are getting a manager that has a track record of winning. Now, albeit maybe up until Spurs, you could say that maybe winning at Celtic isn't glamorous, winning in Australia isn't glamorous, winning in Japan isn't glamorous, but this man has done it in multiple countries. And he doesn't just do it, Chris. He says he's going to do it, and he delivers. So there is a little bit of a comparison with Jose Mourinho in terms of I'm the special one. I'm going to win. Very few managers commit themselves. They won trophies, and Ange is one of those. And he pointed today that I think he was asked about season 2, and he says, "No, I'm here. I might have to win in season 1 here. There might not be a season 2." And I think that's just brilliant for the Premier League. And suppose the biggest difference with him and Jose Mourinho is the football is much better to watch. So I think Nottingham Forest fans, results will dictate any, feeling towards the coach. But I mean, what a way to start. I mean, if he goes to Arsenal and Forest go there and sweep them aside, playing great football, they're going to be singing an Ange Postecoglou song in that away end.
Well, as I said, Gareth, what a time to start for Ange going away at the Emirates. I think that the whole of the fan base, the Spurs fan base, will be behind Ange this Saturday lunchtime for sure. What have you made of Arsenal in the first 3 games? Because, of course, all the teams have played 3 games in the Premier League so far. Arsenal got off to a flying start, beating Manchester United 1-0 away, beating Leeds at the Emirates 5-0. Last time out, they lost 1-0. Anfield against Liverpool. Forest so far, they have won 1, they have drawn 1, and they've lost 1. They'll obviously be disappointed losing 3-0 at home at the City Ground against West Ham, who of course we'll talk about in a couple of minutes when Spurs go to the London Stadium on Saturday evening. Arsenal, are they title contenders in your eyes? Can they win the Premier League this year? When you go to the likes of Liverpool, you've got to be winning games like that, I suppose, if you want to win the Premier League.
Well, that's it. In my opinion, Arsenal are title contenders. Pains me to say it, but they still have question marks to answer, Chris. The question marks that Spurs have under Pochettino are there under Arsenal with Arteta, that they've been very consistent without winning anything. Arteta won in his first season when he came in, which really wasn't his team during the COVID season. So it's almost forgotten about now by Premier League fans, and even some Arsenal fans have said, 5 years without a trophy is not good enough for this club. And you look at the money that's being spent. Liverpool did spend a lot of money in the transfer market, but Arsenal actually came out of all 20 clubs with the most net spend, because Liverpool obviously sold a lot of players. They fund some of their big moves. So, there's more pressure on Arteta again. He's finally got what he said he didn't have in a striker, and Gyökeres, he's what they went with. And there's been a lot of criticism on Gyökeres for his performances against Man United away and Liverpool away, and question marks, on him. And it'll be interesting to see how he deals with the pressure, because yes, he did score 2 goals against Leeds, but the game is over, to be totally honest. At that stage, they were cruising Arsenal, and 3 points are in the bag. So he'll be judged in the big games. And we've seen this before, Chris, with Harry Kane. If didn't matter what he did against Swansea, and didn't matter what he did against teams like West Brom, it was all about could he do it in the big games. And he was criticised a lot, and that'll be the target on Gyökeres' back. Can he perform in these big games? And against Liverpool, he didn't have a great game. But look, I didn't think it was a great spectacle, Chris. I know you went big on your scoreline of 3-2. I did sort of see it as being a very tactical, cagey affair. I did tip Arsenal 1-0. It was a Liverpool 1-0 victory in the end, and there wasn't much to separate the 2 teams other than that unbelievable free kick from
Unreal.
Yeah. So, based on that, there's not much between the teams. And, Arsenal maybe just on the wrong end of a great goal in the day. I think Matchweek, who I question, has been excellent. He looks like a threat. He was brilliant for England during the week.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, no one's mentioning Bukayo Saka. He's a fantastic player because Matchweek is playing so well. So Arsenal definitely have strength and depth. And I think Ange alluded to that he sees a stronger Arsenal squad this season than last year. But everyone else around them have strengthened, including Liverpool, and they definitely are the standard. And the fact that Liverpool have got that early one on them as well, and you look at Liverpool's fixtures as well, it's important Arsenal don't drop any more points in the next few weeks, because if Liverpool get that lead that they had last year, where they, I think they won 10 of their first 11 games, Arsenal were always playing catch up, and that'll be the thing for Arsenal. They need to try and keep maximum points and win as many games as possible. But look, Chris, I always think the season starts now. You've got Champions League games either side of Premier League games. You see injuries happening. We've already seen some injuries during that international break. The season starts now. You're looking to try and get as many points as you can. Reevaluate now in the October international break when you've maybe had a decent start in the Champions League or the Europa League, whatever you're on. But the season starts on Saturday. So, what'll look like a tricky game, we Nuno. I still think it's a tricky game. I've seen some Arsenal fans going, oh, well, Ange is going to attack. I don't know, because he's only got so many days to work with the players, Chris. I don't think Ange will move away completely from that style up, because the players are used to it. So even if Ange is trying to work on certain things, it won't have registered with the 2 or 3 sessions that he's had. So it may still be a very different, very similar Nuno type performance. So I think that'll make it difficult for Arsenal, but a fascinating week game to start the weekend. I mean, I am buzzing for this.
Yeah, first day that he's actually worked properly with the players is today, and we're recording this on Thursday evening. Ange Postecoglou and Forest have got to create history if they do win, though, at the Emirates, because they've never won at the Emirates in the Premier League. Nottingham Forest have won just 2 out of 16 Premier League matches against Arsenal, drawing 4 and losing 10. And both of those wins came at the City Ground in the 96-97 season and the 22-23 season. And in all competitions, Arsenal have won their last 6 home games against Nottingham Forest by an aggregate score of 19-2. The Gunners are unbeaten in 14 games on home soil against Forest, winning 10 and drawing 4 since a 3-1 defeat back in March 1989. Gareth, what are you going for?
Well, look, Chris, I think it's not Arsenal's strongest team. Saka's not going to be playing. There's rumours that Saliba's injured as well. So that's 2 big players they will be missing. Forest...
keep them coming. Keep them coming.
Well, that's it. And I mean, maybe the new manager thing with Ange, can he, we know Ange is a very good motivational speaker. Will he give a speech that inspires the players to go out and, dig deep? And look, whatever you think about Forest, they're not going to roll over in this game. Ange's tactics will change. Forest will change and evolve week by week. But as I said, I still expect a very dogged, resilient Forest and maybe a bit of quality in the counter-attack. I think it'll be a tight game, Chris. Especially with the 12:30 games, you rarely see loads of goals in these games. So I'm just going to go for an Arsenal 2-1-1, but a very tight game. And it wouldn't surprise me if Big Ange come on with a storm.
Yeah, I know it's a rarity, but I agree with you. I've written down 2-1. So we're both going for a 2-1 home win. Next up, a 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday, Bournemouth against Brighton. Bournemouth currently have 6 points. Brighton have 4. Now, of course, last time out, Bournemouth came to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and got 1-0 win. And it could have been so many more, Gareth, that game. And last time out for Brighton, they beat Manchester City 2-1 at home. What have you made of both sides?
Well, Chris, I think I referenced this last week when we were before the international break when we spoke about this. These are 2 of the sides that on any given day can beat anyone, because if they turn up and play at their best, which we've seen, Bournemouth were excellent. Spurs definitely. There's always a bit of both. Spurs definitely underperformed. And as you say, 1-0 flattered Spurs. It could have easily been 3-4. And, bar the last 10 or 15 minutes when we huffed and puffed, never really looked like scoring. So credit to Bournemouth. I mean, I thought they were very unlucky not to get a result at Anfield. Battle back from 2-0 down to get it back to 2 each. And of course, Liverpool score a couple of late goals. They take the game away from them. But Bournemouth have started the season well, beat Wolves. And between both of those games, and look, it was a difficult start on paper, going away to Spurs, going away to Liverpool, and being at home to Wolves. They've got 6 points, so I think they're doing really well. They're a very exciting watch. I think Areola is a fantastic manager, and they'll definitely be looking to be teams headhunting him. So this will be interesting to see how Bournemouth do this year, and can they sustain the levels they hit last year when they were very impressive. Brighton, we did say, Chris, that they did beat Man City last year, but it was a one-off. But it turns out it was 2 years in a row. And Brighton fully deserved their victory. Brilliant performance in the second half. And again, it's difficult to call this game because, it wouldn't surprise me if Bournemouth blew Brighton away. It wouldn't surprise me if Brighton blew Bournemouth away, or it wouldn't surprise me if it was a draw, because it'll be both of these teams are inconsistent. When they're at their very best, they can beat anyone, and when they're at their worst, they can lose to anyone. So, very difficult game, but I would say it'll be a very entertaining game, Chris, because both these teams can score goals.
I always say this, Gareth, and sorry if I'm repeating myself again. Iriola, what a job that he has done at Bournemouth, because the amount of players that went out the door in the summer, and for him to take Bournemouth to Spurs, and the way that they won that game, and like we've both said already, it could have been so many more. How good is he as a boss? Has he got a really good future ahead of him?
I think on the evidence that we've seen, Chris, it's hard to discount that he doesn't have a good future. I mean, the one thing that he was obviously linked with the Spurs job in the summer, more so towards the back end of the season when Ange was still the manager. He was one that was possibly being looked at, but I think maybe one of the things that went against Areola was how Bournemouth finished the season. They had quite a poor finish to the season. They were competing for kind of 4th, 5th, 6th, end up finishing 9th. I think they just ran out of steam with so many injuries, and I suppose the challenge for Areola will be, whether it's maybe with Bournemouth next year if they qualify for Europe through the league, or it's with our club, is how does he manage that sort of Thursday, Sunday football, because his teams play a high press and they work very hard, and you've seen towards the back end of last season how many injuries they had, and they were running out of steam, and they're finished to the season. I think their last 6 or 7 games they struggled to get many points. So that'll be the challenge, because playing 1 game a week is much easier to prepare for than it is to prepare for 3 games in 7 days, and that'll be the only challenge. That'll be what Thomas Frank's challenge is this year at Spurs. He had that at Brentford where it was 1 game a week, and he gets the job. And Areola will definitely have no shortage of sitters. I'm sure we'll talk about Man United and about Chris, but there's going to be our managers out there that if Amram ends up leaving, the likes of, I know you're very impressed with Oliver Glasner, Areola's another one. And Premier League experience is absolutely key when you're coming into a big club like Man United or an big club. So Areola will definitely have a bright future ahead of him, and he will definitely get his opportunity. We've seen it with Graham Potter, Chris. Got his opportunity, didn't really work out. Thomas Frank's now getting his opportunity. Let's hope it does work out for us. But, I always find it very difficult to judge managers that are 1 game a week every week, because Graham Potter looked like the real deal, didn't he? He was linked with the England job at one stage when he was at Brighton, and, he struggled ever since. So it's a big, big challenge. But I think the thing that really helps these managers at Bournemouth and at Brighton is the setup that they have. And Thomas Frank alluded to that at Brentford, that the setup is really, really good for a new coach. So you're not really ever going to walk into a mess at any of these clubs. You're walking into a very stable background. And that definitely can help, especially the manager. And from a coaching point of view, you can concentrate on the players, not really have to worry about what's going on in the background. Whereas you look at Man United, you've looked at Spurs over the last few years, it's not just been what's happening on the pitch, Chris. It's been what's happening off the pitch with recruitment and things like that. And all these clubs have nailed that. So I think Bournemouth and Brighton are a credit to the Premier League. How they operate, how they run, doesn't matter. They've changed managers a few times, or they've lost managers. They are clubs, and nothing really changes. They're very steady Eddie. And I think 2 teams that are very attractive to watch, Chris. So I do expect goals in this game.
Gareth, just very quickly before we go to score predictions on this one, Bournemouth and Brighton, they've been knocking on the door for Europe for the last couple of seasons, certainly. What would be a good season for both of them?
I think they'd be disappointed if they didn't be in the hat, fighting. I mean, you look at it now, they'll be hoping again that there's 5 spots for the Champions League, because that means obviously there's an extra spot open then for the Conference League. So you'd have 6th, 7th, and possibly 8th. Probably, I can't mind who finished 8th last year. It might have been Brighton, I think. Chris actually finished 8th, but they were unfortunate that Crystal Palace and had won the Conference League. So usually a team that wins the FA Cup or the League Cup tends to finish in a European place. Palace were the first team in a long time that won a cup that wasn't involved in Europe via the table. So that went against Brighton in the end. But look, there's no reason why these clubs can't compete. I think if any of these clubs finished 10th, 11th, 12th, it would be seen as a disappointing season. So, but my advice to both these sets of fan bases would, don't be getting too carried away with the league. We've seen what Crystal Palace did last year. We've seen what Newcastle did. We've seen what Spurs did. As much as it's great to be in Europe, Chris, winning a trophy trumps it all. And I think that's why Ange Postecoglou's been brought on to Nottingham Forest. We've seen the brief. They want to not just do well in the league, they want to win trophies. And I think Brighton and Bournemouth, I hope when the FA Cup comes around, they aren't one of those clubs that makes 11 changes, because they're in no danger of relegation. Have a really good cup run. From someone who loves the FA Cup, Chris, I think Crystal Palace winning it last year is brilliant for the FA Cup, because all our clubs like Crystal Palace will look at that and go, well, if Crystal Palace can do it, we can do it. So it might make a more competitive FA Cup. And definitely these two teams should target the FA Cup, because also as well, it gets you a Europa League spot minimum.
Ray, who is watching on Facebook, thinks that this one is going to be a draw, and I agree. I'll give you my score prediction in a second. Bournemouth won 4 of their first 6 Premier League matches against Brighton and Hove Albion, drawing 1, losing 1, but they have since lost 5 of their last 6 against the Seagulls, winning 1. Now, interestingly, last season, Brighton beat Bournemouth 2-1 at home and away. I'm going to go for 1-1 on this one, Gareth.
I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
Wow. God, we are agreeing on a lot then these days.
Yeah.
What's happening?
I know. You're I think you're listening to my predictions now. You think you're trying to guess what I'm going to predict.
I'm going first. I'm going first here. Right,
Yeah.
Next up, Crystal Palace against Sunderland. We've mentioned, on a couple of the previous shows that we've recorded that, we've both been very impressed with what Oliver Glasner has done. He will be absolutely delighted that the Mark Gay deal fell through on deadline day, where he was meant to be signing for Liverpool, because he believes that he is a very important player for Crystal Palace. And he come out and said that if they want to have a successful season, they need players like him at the heart of the defence. Palace should be winning this game against Sunderland, shouldn't they, at home?
Yeah, Chris, and look, they should do, but I referenced this in the last podcast video for anyone that's been watching, or anyone hasn't watched. You feel free to go back. We spoke about this. I know Chris has been saying he's very, very impressed with Oliver Glasner, as have I. But I did say to you, Chris, I think I do see trouble down the line here. And of course, we seen what happened on deadline day, that Oliver Glasner was threatening to walk out. We hear if Gahey was sold, and you could see that Oliver Glasner was very unhappy. And then I watched the Europa Conference League playoff games, and his interviews, you could see he was down. He was very down in the dumps, because he obviously had just been told that Eze was going to be leaving. And there was also that Steve Parish had come out and says, we can't afford to lose a player of Gahey's quality for nothing next year. We've got to try and sell him for as much as we can. And it seemed to be they wanted 40 million, but they were prepared then to accept 35 with Liverpool. Gahey wanted to go there. And I'd look for all money on deadline day that he was going to make the move. And only for Oliver Glasner to say, look, if he goes, that's me. I'm out of here. You aren't matching my ambitions. We can't be selling our best players in a position of strength. But the one thing I would worry, Chris, from a Glasner point of view, and for Crystal Palace as well, is I think the damage is probably done now. I do think this will be his last season at Crystal Palace, because, he's going to move on next year anyway on a free deal. They're not going to be able to replace those two players. And Crystal Palace, unfortunately, aren't that type of club. They're a great club, but they aren't the type of club that's going to splash big money to try and compete. Nottingham Forest are being brave, but their owner seems to be willing to put the money in. Crystal Palace are different. They're very much ran a bit like how Spurs are. Steve Parish is a bit of a tough man, hard to negotiate bargains. And look, he's done a fantastic job, but I just think Oliver Glasner's probably got his eyes opened and probably thinks that his expectations is higher. And I'll be very shocked if we're sitting here in game week 4 next year, Chris, doing this show, and he's still the Crystal Palace manager. But look, he'll give it everything this year. Palace have another team or a very good chance of maybe doing well in that Europa Conference League. Can they be a team that goes on? They love European silverware. I'd love to see it, because, again, a fantastic club. In terms of this game, at home, they're a tough opposition for anyone. You would expect them to beat Sunderland.
Well, also away, because their last result before the international break, Palace went to Villa, and Villa just don't lose Premier League games at home under Nuno Emery. And they went there to Villa Park and won the game 3-0, very convincing. And, when I said at the start of this piece about this game and said that Crystal Palace should be beating Sunderland, well, Sunderland at home so far this season, 2 Premier League games, 2 wins. The only one that they've played away so far was away at Burnley, and they lost that one 2-0. Very impressive stat, though, from Sunderland to win their 2 home Premier League games. That's exactly what you need to do as a newly promoted side. And they've beat West Ham and they've beat Brentford as well. So 2 good results there. But do you know what, Gareth? I don't think you're going to agree with me on this score prediction, but I'll give you some stats first before I give it to you. This is the first meeting between Crystal Palace and Sunderland since February 2017 in the Premier League, and Sunderland won 4-0 at Selhurst Park. I don't think that's going to happen on Saturday. I'm going to go for a 3-0 Crystal Palace win.
Oh, 3-0. Jermaine Defoe actually scored 2 goals in that game. One of the goals was a fantastic goal. Remember, I think Sam Allardyce was in charge at Crystal Palace at the time. I think they were 4-0 down at half time. I remember that game because I think it was one of the foes' last goals for Sunderland. So, Chris, look, Sunderland have had a great start. I think, like Leeds, like Burnley, home form is, like you pointed out, it's going to be absolutely key to their chances of staying up. I think obviously they beat West Ham, but if you watch that game against West Ham, Chris, they were battered in the first half. And against Brentford should have they missed chance after chance. They missed a penalty, crossbar. I think Sunderland are fortunate to be on the 6 points that they are. So I think if they continue on that pattern, they're going to have to perform a lot better in games to get results. They've had a great start. Can they build on that? I don't see it this weekend, Chris. I think Crystal Palace at home will be too strong. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Palace one.
Right, next up, Everton at their new stadium against Aston Villa. And so far, Everton have 6 points. Aston Villa are sitting 19th at the moment with only 1 point. Now, last time out for Everton, they beat Wolves 3-2 away. As we just mentioned, last time for Aston Villa, they lost 3-0 at home against Crystal Palace. Now, all I'm going to say about Everton right now, Gareth, is Jack Grealish, 4 assists. He has been brilliant for them.
Yeah, he's had a great start. And look, I know you're probably going to tell me what you says. I know you wanted him at Spurs, and I kind of says I don't really think he's maybe he's past his best. But look, I have to sit here.
You're mad.
Yeah, I have to sit here and say I was wrong so far. I mean, what a start for Grealish. I think Everton's been crying out for a player like Grealish for a long time, and I know Ndiaye's quite flairful and skillful. Having Grealish and Ndiaye in the same team, and they've actually been. I think he's been involved in some of the goals Ndiaye scored as well. Grealish setting them up. I think that's a fantastic partnership already brewing for Everton, and I think Everton fans, especially at that new stadium, they've went through so much that they've been crying out for a bit of creativity and crying out for a bit of excitement. And I think with Grealish and Ndiaye, they've got 2 players that get you off your seat. And I know that's a big one for you, Chris. A player that gets you off your seat. If you're an Everton fan, Grealish and Ndiaye definitely get you off your seat. So it's definitely going to be a bit of a buzz around Everton. Of course, they got their first one at home as well in the opening game against Brighton. So they'll be going into this game full of confidence against a Villa team, Chris, who look absolutely on the floor at the moment. You mentioned that they've got 1 point. They're very lucky to have that 1 point. Newcastle were by far the better team in the opening weekend, and they've been well beaten by Brentford. It was 1-0 flattered them and battered at home by Crystal Palace. So very, very concerning start for Unai Emery and Aston Villa, Chris. And I did mention this at the start of the season that I worried for Villa, not in terms of any relegation, but just the lack of business, the lack of freshening things up. Unai Emery looks a bit deflated. And Unai Emery's teams, when they go on bad runs, Chris, the bad runs spiral. And it seems like he finds it very difficult to stop it. And this is actually going back to the back end of last season, Chris. You know, losing the semi-final, the FA Cup to Crystal Palace 3-0. You know, losing to Man United on the last day of the season. They missed out in the Champions League. It's a bit like when Pochettino had left Spurs, regardless of the Champions League runs. A lot of Spurs fans were pointing out that the second half of the season before wasn't good. And we've seen a lot of people last year comparing when Ange was on the bad run that, you know, this had started after the Chelsea game the season before. So I think Palace or Aston Villa are in a bit of a rut, Chris. And look, going to Everton is going to be very, very tough. They're flying, full of confidence, 2-1 on the bounce. And I don't really see anything other than a home one and worrying times ahead for Aston Villa.
Yeah, last season in the Premier League, Aston Villa beat Everton 3-2 at Villa Park, and then they also beat Everton 1-0 at Goodison in January. Everton are winless, though, in their last 12 Premier League matches against Aston Villa, all since Villa returned to the competition in 2019-2020, drawing 3, losing 9. Their last win was in March 2016, a 3-1 win at Villa Park. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Everton win. And I think Jack Grealish is going to be involved in the goal again.
Well, you'd be foolish. They say he wouldn't be involved. The many goals he's been setting up. Maybe he's first. Maybe he'll get that goal as well. But look, I think you're right. I think Everton will win the game. But I'm going to go for a different score. I'm going to go for 2-1 to Everton. And maybe Villa get their first goal of the season because they haven't scored yet in the league, believe it or not.
I don't think I've ever heard you say you were wrong. Fair play, Gareth. Fair play. Next up, Fulham. Look at the silence. Fulham v Leeds. So Fulham at the moment are in 18th. Leeds United are in 12th. Now, Fulham at the moment, they have drawn against Brighton. They've drawn against Manchester United and they lost against Chelsea. Leeds, since returning to the Premier League, beat Everton 1-0, and then then they lost 5-0 away at Arsenal, and then recently drew 0-0 against Newcastle. How do you see this one going, Gareth? And what would be the expectation for both of these clubs this season?
Well, Chris, we'll start with Fulham because, I think it will be wrong to sit here and not mention it, but I mean, they were very, very harshly done by in that game against Chelsea. I mean, they did a massive decision go against them with the PGMOL, had he apologised for it directly after the game.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Fulham should have been 1-0 up right before half time, and that is a game changer, an absolute game changer. They end up losing the game 2-0, and like again, a very fortuitous penalty, I thought, for Chelsea. So I think two decisions went against them. One was definitely wrong. The other one was a real 50-50 that if it hadn't been given the handball, I don't think anyone would have been crying about it. So I think Marco Silva doesn't take much to get annoyed, but he was absolutely furious, wasn't he, in that game with the officials. And look, Fulham were the better team in that first half, and they were the better team in the second half against Man United, and only managed to get a draw. So I do think if Fulham maintain that level, their first League One isn't far away. And I think with Leeds at home, especially how Leeds played away at Arsenal, Leeds, I think very much like Sunderland, the home form is going to be key for Leeds. I think away from home, Leeds will be a different side because we know Ellen Road's going to be rocking. I think away from home, it'll be more difficult for them. And I mean, I watched them against Newcastle. I don't think it was a great game. They won their first game, Leeds, against Everton, 1-0. I don't see a lot of goals in the Leeds team, Chris. I think that'll be the one worry. It was a penalty that beat Everton on the opening night. No goals against Arsenal. No goals against Newcastle. Never really looked like scoring. I think there's a shortage of quality up there. You've got Peru, who's a championship striker. Calvert-Lewin's come on a free transfer. We know his injury record isn't great. So you just wonder, will Leeds have enough goals on them? Fulham, I do think better days are ahead than the results they've had. So I think Fulham will be a team that's knocking on that Europa Conference League door. Like somewhere to Brighton, somewhere to Bournemouth. I just think consistency is what lets these teams down. I think Fulham are another team on their day. The way they performed at Stamford Bridge in that first half was outstanding. So they're a team that can go anywhere and get a result. But also they can lose to anyone. So at home against Leeds, you would expect Fulham to win. But if you look at last year, Chris, this was some of the games that Fulham had difficulty with at home. I think they drew with Southampton, they drew with Ipswich, they drew with Leicester. 3 teams that got relegated. So sometimes when the expectations on Fulham, they struggle to deal with. So that'll be what they have to overcome on Saturday, because I think they're huge favourites for this game.
Well, Fulham have lost just one of their 5 home Premier League matches against Leeds United, winning 3, drawing 1, going down 2-1 in the 2020-2021 season under Scott Parker. This one, I am going to go for the home team. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Fulham win.
I'm going for a big scoreline. I'm going for a 3-0 Fulham 1.
3-0?
Yeah.
Okay, didn't expect that. Okay, next up, Newcastle, who are currently in 17th against Wolves, who are foot of the table. So this is a big one. Both of these teams need points. So far, Newcastle, a 0-0 draw away at Villa Park. That was the first game of the season. Second game of the season, they, of course, lost 3-2 at home against Liverpool. And last time out that I just mentioned, 0-0 away at Leeds. And Wolves are having a very tough time at the moment. 3 games, 3 defeats, losing to Manchester City, losing to Bournemouth, and recently losing to Everton. I think I said this to you before, Gareth. Victor Pereira at Wolves, I felt, done a really good job there last season. And he's very down with the fans as well, because after the games, he goes into the local pubs to have a drink, have a pint with the fans. How many people do that? Incredible. Newcastle, what do you expect from them? Of course, Isak has now left. They've had a lot of transfer activity, ins and outs. What is the expectation at St James's this season, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think they'll just be glad that the transfer window is over. The Isak thing has passed, and I think in the end it's the right thing that's happened for Newcastle. They've got a big fee. They've been able to get on 2 players for that money, and the striker Wolfman, I think it is, the German striker. And Johan Vissa, who's a Premier League proven goal scorer. Are they as good as Isak? Absolutely not. But between them, can they muster up the goals that Isak scored? Possibly. So, it may be that they're a bit better. They've a bit more cover up there in terms of, two players that can play in that role. Anthony Gordon, who got suspended, obviously, after that red card against Liverpool, and that first half, done a really good job playing through the middle. So they've got options, Newcastle. And I mean, it's probably surprising, Chris, that they haven't scored more goals. The 2 away games, they haven't scored a goal, because against Liverpool, they scored 2 and looked, they could have scored a lot more. So I think there's a lot of quality in that Newcastle team. We know they've got a big, physical, strong midfield that will give anyone a game. So, no, I think that the positivity will return to Newcastle now that the Isak thing has moved on. I mean, they don't play Liverpool now until the second half of the season. So, there's not to say that there's a game coming up against Liverpool where Isak has to come back to St James's Park. That won't happen until next season unless the 2 teams meet in a cup. So, I think they can move on from Isak and start to build with what they have. I think Eddie Howe's a fantastic manager. He can get the best out of his players. He's good at dealing with adversity. I thought he conducted himself brilliantly through the whole summer window with Isak. And look, I think he's one of those managers, Chris. If he's a manager of your club, you're very happy because, he's just the way he conducts himself. He's a fantastic coach. He's brilliant with his players. He's brilliant with his coaching staff. And I think Newcastle will have better days ahead. Wolves, I think it's brilliant what the manager does, going into the match, going into the pub after the game, having a pint with the fans. I mean, I've seen something similar at Wrexham in the documentary where Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, the owners, done it. And it just creates a real connection, doesn't it, Chris? And I think there's nothing. I would just hope that the results don't continue this way, because they may have to stop going for a pint after the game.
Can I also tell you as well that Victor Pereira actually organised a behind closed doors friendly? We were up at the Wolves training ground last weekend, and whilst a lot of the players were on international duty, the players that were there and the under 21 players, etc., he organised a behind closed doors friendly. So obviously he is not going to be happy with losing 3 out of 3, sitting bottom of the Premier League table. Things have got to turn around for Wolves soon. Do you fear for them this season, or can they turn it around? I know it's early days. We're only 3 games in, I know.
Well, Chris, we spoke about this, didn't we, at the start of the season with Wolves, and obviously they've had a poor start to the season, which isn't something that they aren't accustomed to. I mean, Wolves have been like around the bottom of the table after the first 6 or 7 games in the last few seasons. They're one of those teams on the last few seasons that seems they take a long time to win a game, and when they do win a game, they tend to go on a run. But often that results in a change of manager. We've seen Lopetegui come on, done a brilliant job, kept them up, and then he left because of the issues off the pitch with selling their best players. Gareth McGuiness comes on the eve of the season. I think he was appointed on the Thursday or the Friday before the season started. And I think his first game was on the Monday night at Old Trafford, and they were unlucky to lose the game, but they had a fantastic season that year. Then more players depart the club, Chris. Gareth McGuiness then struggles at the start of last season. They give him as much time as possible to turn it around, but eventually the results became untenable that they had to make a change. Vitor Pereira comes in, does a fantastic job. Then again, more players leave in the summer. It just seems like Groundhog Day for Wolves, where they're losing all their best players every single season. Chris, I pointed back to Southampton a number of years ago when they were selling the likes of Walcott and Gareth Bale and Luke Shaw, Morgan Schneiderlin. Eventually it caught up with them and they got relegated. I just wonder, are Wolves, if it doesn't happen this year, how many more seasons can they keep going of selling their best players, changing the manager, and staying up by the skin of their teeth? I just think that it's inevitable. If it doesn't happen this year, it's bound to happen in the next year or two. Wolves, they need to get out of that habit. I know that money is tight there and the finances aren't great and they're forced to sell these players, but you're looking for minor miracles every summer and every season. And I mean, if Vitor Pereira, if he loses his next 4 or 5 games, Chris, are they going to stick by him, or are they going to make a change? Because the change is what's worked for them in previous seasons. So I think it's crucial that Vitor Pereira gets a win somewhere. I just don't see it happening this weekend up at St James's Park.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a 4th straight defeat in the Premier League for Wolves at St James's Park. Now, some match facts and stats here. Newcastle United have lost just 2 of their 20 Premier League matches against Wolves, winning 7, drawing 11, a defeat percentage of just 10%, their lowest against any side that they have faced at least 20 times in the competition. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Newcastle win, which, of course, could be their first Premier League win of the season. What are you going for, Gareth?
I'm going for a 5-0 Newcastle one.
A 5-0. You going for it?
Well, I looked at Wolves last week
Wow.
against Everton, and they were carved open a number of times. And I just think if Newcastle get an early goal with the new signings, the Isak things past them, I think they could run Wolves ragged, to be honest. So I think just because they're going to St James's Park, and I think if there's an early goal goes in, it's going to be a long afternoon for Wolves. So I'm going to go with a big one, 5-0.
Wow. Okay. Right. Next up is the big one. 5:30 p.m. kickoff at the London Stadium. West Ham United v Tottenham Hotspur. League position at the moment. West Ham are 16th. Spurs are 4th. West Ham have 3 points. Tottenham have 6. Goals scored so far this season. West Ham 4. Tottenham Hotspur 5. Now, as we know, West Ham got off to a defeat in the Premier League on the opening weekend, losing 3-0 away at Sunderland. They then lost 5-1 at home against Chelsea, and last time out they beat Nuno Espirito Santo's Nottingham Forest, which of course turned out to be his last game at the City Ground and in charge of Forest. West Ham winning 3-0 there, which was a surprise result for a lot of people. And Tottenham, as we know, 3 Premier League games, 2 wins, 1 defeat, beating Burnley at home, beating Manchester City away. That very impressive result and performance. And last time out, so many people were saying to me, 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, Tottenham are going to blow Bournemouth away. It didn't happen. Bournemouth did a job on Spurs, and fair play to them. Gareth, let me start by asking you here, that Bournemouth defeat at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, was it just an off day? Are you worried? Do you have any concerns? Or was it just a bad day at the office?
Well, Chris, we previewed the game, obviously, on the show. And we did say it was a dangerous game because we know Bournemouth on their day can beat anyone. And if we were at our best, which we clearly weren't, and Bournemouth were at themselves, which they were, it was going to be a difficult afternoon. And look, what I would say is Bournemouth can do that to anyone. I've seen them do it at St James's Park last year. They won 4-1 in January. They absolutely blew Newcastle out of the water. And again, it could have been any score. So I think Bournemouth, when they're on a good day, they're a tough team to stop. Yes, Spurs let themselves down. Did Thomas Frank pick the right team on the basis of the result and the performance? Probably not. He probably didn't want to change a winning team after the Man City game, but the team that we had probably wasn't set up to play against Bournemouth the way it was against Man City, and I think that's where we went wrong.
Can I ask on that? Because everyone was full of praise after that Manchester City game, and it was a very impressive win at the Etihad. Everyone was praising Thomas Frank. Everyone was praising every single Tottenham Hotspur player involved in that win that day. But after the Bournemouth game, a lot of people, I've seen a lot of comments now really judging and criticising Thomas Frank. Did he get it? Do you think, from a you're a football coach, from a coach's perspective, did he get it wrong that day?
I thought he did when I seen the lineup, and I did write that I wrote that on myself. But it's difficult because if he had changed it and we lost the game, people would have said, "Well, why have you changed the one team for?" There was nothing to change. But I think he should have recognised that maybe Bournemouth at home and Man City away are 2 completely different games. I mean, Bergville come on and made a difference. And we lacked creativity, Chris. We had a lot of possession in those opening 15, 20 minutes and couldn't really break them down. And then from that point on, Bournemouth were really in the ascendancy. And it was only really when Bournemouth didn't get the second goal, they kind of, and this happens in football, they kind of rested on let's protect the 1-0 for the last 10 minutes. And Spurs had a few half chances, but couldn't really break them down. And I think we've obviously seen since we've signed Xavi Simons and Colomboyani, who we'll speak about ahead of the game, but they've come in and Xavi Simons gives you that creativity. Of course, Madison's injured, Kulusevski's injured, and that's why I was surprised that in a game like this at home, Bergville didn't start the game. I think that was the one thing that he probably should have done. But look, he's going to make mistakes. Managers aren't perfect. I think if he could take it back, he would. But like I says, if he had changed it, Chris, and we lost the game, people would have said, well, why have you changed the winning team? So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you don't win a game, you're always going to come on for criticism. And look, the criticism is unfair. We've had a great start to the season. We were out in Italy. I mean, we should have beat PSG. You're the best team in the world. Dominated that game. We went to Man City, dominated Man City, beat Burnley at home convincingly. And we've had an off day against Bournemouth. But look, you have to make these mistakes to learn. And look, Thomas Frank's got a big week ahead of him. It's the first time he's going to have to navigate 3 games in the 1 week. Of course, it's West Ham away, Villarreal at home on Tuesday, and Brighton away on Saturday. So it's 3 tough games in 7 days. And he's got to find a way of navigating that period.
We know now, Gareth, as you've just alluded to, that these games are now coming thick and fast. And as you've just mentioned, that Villarreal game, first game in the Champions League group stage for Spurs on Tuesday at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Fortunately, we haven't got to travel too far for this game to West Ham on Saturday evening. How does Thomas Frank approach this game in terms of team selection? When you've just mentioned the schedule coming up, how strong does he go? And you've mentioned Javi Simmons there, and you've mentioned Kolo Muani. Do both of them get a start on Saturday at London Stadium, would you say?
I think definitely, because I think Richarlison had a really poor game against Bournemouth. And look, we didn't really have anyone to come off the bench and change it. And that is, and I see Kolo Muani is a different type of striker. He gives you a different outlet. I think creativity, like we pointed out, was massively missing against Bournemouth. And look, I think Bournemouth are a miles better team than West Ham. I don't foresee, even if we're poor, I don't see West Ham doing the Spurs what Bournemouth did at times. I think Bournemouth are a very, very good side, good footballing side. They've got pace, they've got power, they've got strength. I think West Ham lack mobility, they lack athleticism. And I think with Spurs, is the makeup of that Spurs team on Saturday should be too strong. The only thing I would say is it's West Ham at home. They're going to be up for it, But like you seen with Chelsea, I think they were up for that game and they even scored an early goal. But Chelsea got a goal back and they were in the ascendancy and it flattened the crowd. And I think that's the most important thing Spurs have got to do. I think if Spurs, I don't see any other result if Spurs score first than a comfortable Spurs win. So I just don't think West Ham are that type of team that's going to come back. I think morale's quite low, even though they beat Forest 3-0. Chris, it was 0-0 up until the 82nd minute. That was a bit of a freak result in the end. So look, I wouldn't be reading too much into that. But if you look at the performances against Sunderland in the second half and the Chelsea game, where Chelsea have so much athleticism and so much pace, they ran them ragged. And I just don't see, if Spurs are at their best, how that West Ham midfield and defence will be able to cope with Spurs. I think Xavi Simmons comes in. I think Muani comes in. And I think that gives Spurs a lot more attacking flair and a lot more talent. And I just think West Ham will struggle because up until that Forest game, Chris, they've been conceding a lot of goals and conceding a lot of chances. I mean, Chelsea were 5-1 up with 25 minutes they play, I think, and they just took their foot off the gas. Chelsea could have scored any amount of goals on that night. And I just think we haven't won at West Ham for a while. I know you're going to bring up the stats, but I do sense this will be the weekend that we do.
Gareth, before I give you the stats, I put on social media a couple of days ago, you've probably seen it, that, we keep up to date with every bit of news on this channel, of course. And one piece of news that I thought I'd share with a lot of people is the fact that West Ham have not sold this game out. It's actually gone on general sale. On general sale for a game like this, their cup final. It means so much. So it's funny because the Spurs fans were bantering the West Ham fans saying, well, you can't even sell out your cup final. But then we did have a couple of West Ham fans replying saying, well, you're just not a big club and we don't care about you anymore.
Seriously?
Is that the reaction? That's it. That's it. Right, let me give you some stats.
West Ham fans are like Arsenal fans. They're spiteful, very spiteful.
Well, it's actually, before I give you the stats, what would be a good season for West Ham? Because there is a lot, we often speak about fans' frustrations.
Chris, I think West Ham would take 17th now. I think they would take 17th now if you offered them.
Wow. Okay, if that's the ambition, then
No, I don't. It's not the ambition, but I think their fans know.
Well, it might be.
Well, I think the fans have lost faith in the manager, and I think the fans don't really believe in the team. I mean, losing Kudos, Bowen. There's a lot of pressure on Jared Bowen. The midfield's all wrong. The defense looks short of pace, and the manager looks lost at times. And look, it'd be interesting to see if there's a reaction after the Forest one. Maybe a bit of confidence, but I just think, if we don't beat West Ham this weekend, I don't know when we're going to get a better opportunity to go to London Stadium and get 3 points. Because I think it's Pochettino. This is the last manager that's got 3 points there.
Mohamed Kudus going to the London Stadium. That is going to be an interesting one. That is going to be a fiery encounter, in my opinion. I'd love to see him get that very important assist, or even get a goal in the Premier League against West Ham and do a knee slide right in front of the home fans. Be brilliant.
That'd be our-esque. I think they're going to be gunning for kudos. Sorry, I made a mistake. Or actually, your last one was the first game in Reno, wasn't it? Was the last time we won?
Jose, yeah. Jose 3-2. We hadn't won away for, I think, 10 months, and Jose came in first
TV,
game. Yeah.
I remember on the TV, Chris, you were holding up the Jose banner. I remember that game.
That's it. Yep. 3-2. I remember it very well.
How do you feel now?
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll talk about Daniel Levy in a second, leaving the football club, or stepping down, as the club put it. But yeah, when you appoint managers like that, they need a lot more than what they were given. But I'll ask you about that in a second. And of course, the segments, the Tottenham segments on this Premier League show is always a lot longer. Apologies about that if you support another club. But this is a Spurs channel at the end of the day. West Ham have won just one of their last 7 Premier League matches against Tottenham, drawing 3, losing 3, a 2-1 away win in December 2023. What about this for a stat, though, Gareth? Spurs have lost 10 of their last 16 London derbies in the Premier League, winning 3 and drawing 3, keeping just 1 clean sheet in their last 21 derby matches in the league. And that was a 2-0 away win at Thomas Frank's Brentford back in February 2025. I don't know how I feel about this game. Of course, last season at the London Stadium, it finished 1-1. The previous season, it finished 1-1. I want to see Spurs go there and absolutely batter West Ham, and most importantly, get the 3 points. Do you know what? I'm going to go for a 2-1. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Spurs win. And let's hope that we pick up another 3 points. What are you thinking?
I think an early Spurs goal here, and the game's over, to be honest. I think I just seen how they wilted against Sunderland and how they wilted against Chelsea. I just think there's no real confidence in the group once they concede that first goal. I think that they don't really believe they can get back on it. And I think if we can get that early goal, it'll be comfortable. So I'm going to go on that basis, Chris. And I think Kudos is going to be right up for this game. And it wouldn't surprise me if he gets his first goal. And it really rubs it on the West Ham wins. But I'm going to go for a 3-0 Spurs one.
3-0. Well, you've gone big on some of these scores today. I don't know whether it's too much Guinness over there in Ireland. Perhaps it is.
I'm back from my holiday now, so I'm on a detox.
Do you know what, Gareth?
Maybe that's what's wrong.
Last season at the London Stadium in May, I know it was towards the end of the season, but that was a really, really poor atmosphere. I don't think I've ever been away at West Ham and had such witnessed such a quiet atmosphere. The fans were just so quiet. They're normally up for the banter. They're normally up for the singing. And it was dead. It was absolutely dead. They just weren't at it, the fans at all.
It was a dead rubber game, wasn't it? Because Spurs rested a lot of players because they were in the Europa League, and West Ham were not really going anywhere. It just looked like 2 teams that were on the beach, really, didn't it?
Yeah. Right. Before we move on, let me ask you, a lot has happened at Spurs during this international break. Daniel Levy, like I mentioned earlier, has stepped down, but various other reports have stated that the Lewis family asked Daniel Levy to step down, and Vinay Venkatesham, the CEO at Tottenham, did another interview that Tottenham Hotspur official put out. Gareth, what do you make of Daniel Levy leaving the football club? I know there has been a lot of people complimenting him on the job that he has done, because it is very fair to say that, in 2000, when he came through the door as Spurs chairman, it was a very, very different football club to what it is now. There has always been that fans' frustration that, like I mentioned and alluded to there, when you bring in managers like Jose Mourinho, Antonio Conte, they want top quality players. We probably didn't get the players that they wanted through the door. Mauricio Pochettino, and I know I could go on forever talking about this subject. Pochettino said that, it's all right having this mansion, but you need the furniture to be putting in it. I suppose the fans' frustration, I think a lot of people would say the chairman has always done a good job, in the boardroom and, outside the club, training facilities, everyone mentions it. Everyone, fans, opposition fans, media, everyone says about the training facilities in the stadium. But of course, it is all about, the pitch ambition. So let's get your thoughts on Daniel Levy leaving the football club, and let's get your thoughts on what you think will be different under ENIC now.
Well, Chris, I mean, you would be lying and you would be disingenuous to sit here and say he didn't do a fantastic job commercially for the club. I mean, what he built, what he's turned Spurs into, from maybe eating out of food banks to shopping at the top table. That's where we are. We're seen as a globally massive club now. The stadium, the training facilities, the money that's been generated via our events, NFL, boxing, concerts, rugby. You could go on of what the stadium can offer. And he set us up really, really well for the future. So you have to commend him on that job. I think where it went wrong for Daniel was when we moved to the stadium, his expectations didn't really change. He still operated like we were still in White Hart Lane. And I know there was obviously debt with the stadium, but we've seen the books, we know the numbers. There was money there to be spent. He didn't want to break the wage bill. He wanted to run a tight ship. And look, I think he alluded to it in a number of interviews he's done in the last year that he doesn't think that the Premier League spending from clubs is sustainable. But when Sky's pumping in the TV money that they are, Chris, and we know how big the Premier League is, it's difficult to say where it's going to run dry. I mean, every season the wages are going up, the transfer fees are going up. And we've kind of been thinking for the last number of years this is going to break at some stage. And then COVID comes, and it did for like a year or two, and then it went back to, and it's went even bigger. It's the biggest spending Premier League transfer window in history. Liverpool spent they bought on £200 million players in the one window. And that's the level of spending that's out there. So I think looking back, maybe Daniel should have moved on once the stadium was built, because his attitude never really changed. He was still looking to wheel and deal in the market. He was still, it was a nightmare to get deals done. He said a number of times that he had stepped away from the football background. There was a number of people who had come in for the football operations, but from what we hear, Daniel Levy was always really still in control. So
he would never have left that club though, Gareth. He would never have stepped down on his own accord, would he? And for what he's achieved at the football club, commercially, as you've said, and there's so much more to happen at Spurs as well. He would be absolutely gutted to have been made or told to step down.
Well, I think the step down is out of respect for him. It's clearly that he was moved on. The club are looking to go in a different direction, it seems. And look, maybe the Europa League has lit the bellies of ENIC and the people of the younger generation of the Lewis family have said, we want more of this. We want these scenes regularly. And look, at the end of the day, Chris, Spurs are set up commercially now that well that it's difficult to see why we can't go and compete with the top clubs, because we've got so much rolling in. That our clubs don't have. Our clubs don't have regular contracts. They don't have NFL. They don't have boxing events. We're providing all of that at the stadium. So even when we're not playing at home, where there's an international break, the stadium's still finding a way to generate money on a match day, or if it's a boxing event, or if it's NFL. So we're rolling in. The bank is absolutely rolling it in. So it's difficult to see how it could go wrong now. And I think the issue that Daniel has is he's so set in his ways of trying to get the best deal. And sometimes you just have to overpay, Chris. Sometimes you have to give a Xavi Simons £200,000 a week to get him on the door. Because it's not to say that Xavi Simons is greedy. He knows he can get it elsewhere. So why would he come here for half the wages or, 70 grand a week? It's just not feasible. And I think you listen to some of the reports from some of the respected journalists that a lot of clubs have become tired of negotiating with Daniel. And I think it probably just ran its course. We speak about managers, Chris, like, Jose Mourinho's, Antonio Conte's, Arsene Wenger's, that, once great managers at the top of the game, but the game changes, and the game changes in transfer markets. The game changes on the pitch, and Daniel hasn't moved with the times. He's still been the same stubborn Daniel Levy of the past. And I think when you're doing something for so long, a bit like we seen with Arsene Wenger, and he just was never going to change. And Arsenal had to make a change. That Arsene Wenger again announced that he had stepped down, but he was told either step down or you're getting the boot. And this is a very similar situation off the pitch with the chairman. He's been told that your time is up, and we're going a different way. And look, I think it's exciting for Spurs. I think you can still be credible to Daniel Levy and say, great job, but look, for now, you're not the right man. We need someone in that's going to be ambitious, take a risk. And Chris, we've said this before. if Daniel Levy had went out and spent 60 million on Eze, 60 million on Gibbs White, 60 million on Xavi Simons, and every one of those players didn't perform to the level that we've seen them perform, then that's not on Daniel Levy. That's on the manager. That's on the team makeup. That's Daniel's done his job. He's got those players on the door. But how many times in the last 5 years have we been linked or been in talks with a top player, and we've either ended up missing out and bringing in someone for cheaper wages or a cheaper transfer fee that hasn't worked out? And well, Chris, we'll just touch on it when we're here. The Champions League squad, we had this conversation that if Spurs had spent 60 million on a proper left winger, you wouldn't have had the issue with Matisse Tell and Wilson Odegaard when they paid 30 million for both of those players. You wouldn't have had to leave anyone out because you would have a top left-sided player on the door and in the squad. And this is the problem we've had. And we've seen it recently, Chris, with the sales. We've not been able to generate sales because of poor recruitment and loaning players out, really, when we should have just cut our losses and accepted a nominal fee and recognised we've made a mistake. This player, I mean, Brian Hill, we've hung on to him for 3 seasons too long to get 10 million euros. Absolutely pointless.
Yeah. With this subject, Gareth, we'll do it on a podcast or on another show, because I feel like there is so much to cover on this, and the regulars have got a lot to say, I feel, on this subject as well. Let's go to the last game of Saturday evening, an 8 p.m. kickoff on a Saturday. I've got to say, as a match-going fan that travels all over the place to watch Spurs home and away, I am not a fan of 8 p.m. kickoffs on a Saturday. Spurs actually have one in a couple of weeks against Wolves at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and again, that's before a Champions League game as well. Bodo Glimt. Brentford against Chelsea at the G-Tech Community Stadium. Brentford currently are sitting in 15th. They have 3 points. Chelsea are currently second with 7 points. Chelsea are, of course, unbeaten. A 0-0 draw against Crystal Palace, and then beating West Ham 5-1 away, and beating Fulham 2-0 at home last time out. Brentford against Chelsea. How do you see this one going, Gareth?
Well, it says that I worried for Brentford at the start of the season. I mean, it was a difficult start away at Forest. They had a nightmare first half. But ever since that first half, Chris, you have to say that the ship's been steadied a bit. You know, they beat Aston Villa comfortably. I know it was only 1-0, but they deserved more goals in that game. They beat Bournemouth away in the League Cup, and they really should have beat Sunderland last time out. I mean, they were 1-0 up, missed a penalty, crossbar, post, keeper made saves, and they give away 2 soft goals. The keeper made a mistake, who I'm a big fan of, Kevin Kelleher, Ireland's best player on the national level. Didn't have a great game that day. Of course, we know from Liverpool he's been a very, very good deputy for Alisson when he's been injured. So I think that was one of their best signings of the summer. And I expect them to win Brentford more points than lose them. And they give away a penalty towards the end of the game and lost the game 2-1. And Sunderland somehow ran into 2-1 winners. But I think Keith Andrews will definitely be encouraged with a response, because he gave a very damning interview after that first game where he kind of went after the players and they've responded. And sometimes that can be a negative when you go after the players, but they've responded to him. I think somewhere to Newcastle, Chris, they'll just be happy that the Johan Vissa saga is over. They've got him out the door. They've got a really good fee for him. Yep. I think it was 55 million, which is incredible. Because, I mean, I think Newcastle's first offer was 25 million. So they've wrangled another 30 million out of him. I don't believe he's worth that. I think his contract's up next year and he's 29. So I think that's a brilliant bit of business that Brentford have done. They've brought in some players with that money as well. So it'd be interesting to see Brentford over the next few weeks, Chris, to see how they recover from the summer they've had. Of course, losing Thomas Frank, losing Chris Norgard, their captain, and Buemo, Vissa, big names they've lost. So, but I think it's been a decent. It's as good as a start as they could have hoped for. They got their opening home at one. They got their opening home one against Villa. Another tough game in Chelsea, but we know Brentford's a tough place to go, Chris. And Keith Andrews was obviously teammates with Roy Delap, and Brentford have been doing a lot of work with long throws. So he says that it's going to be a key for Brentford this year, the long throw, which has kind of come back into fashion, Chris, the long throw. It's like a throwback, isn't it? So, yeah. I think Brentford will make it difficult for teams to go to the Brentford Stadium. And I think if they're going to stay up, home form is going to be key.
Is the long throw back because people have stopped copying Pep now?
What's that? As Pep out of fashion, right? Because he's lost.
Exactly. It's back to the old days.
That's it.
Yeah. Just one of the 8 Premier League meetings between Brentford and Chelsea have been won by the home side, drawing 3, losing 4, a 2-1 win for the Blues in December 2024. Gareth, for this one, I'm going to go for a 3-1 Chelsea win. Before you give me your score prediction, you mentioned Johan Wissa there, and we've spoke about Isak going from Newcastle to Liverpool, and the way that they acted, those two in particular, in the transfer window, which a lot of people didn't like. You know, even general football fans didn't like the way that they acted about wanting to leave, you know, still under contract. Mark Gay acted as professionally as you can be, and he was the one that missed out on the move. It don't seem fair in some ways, does it?
I don't think it's good for football that that's happened, Chris, because players that are looking to move next summer are going to be looking at those situations and going, well, Gahey didn't give a minute's ball to anyone, and his move was pulled at the last minute, whereas Vissa and Isak done everything they could, possibly going to be more extreme than we've ever seen before, where they actually made personal statements on their social medias, they removed all their photos and stuff as well. So they completely washed their hands of the club that they were contracted. They angered the fans. And I mean, I spoke about it on previous shows with you, Chris, that it was despicable the way they conducted themselves. But look, the one worry for me now is that Gahey's deal hasn't gone through, and that players is going to look at that now and go, well, if you behave yourself, you're not guaranteed to get a move. But if you do everything you can to undermine the manager, the club, the fans, you'll get your way. And that is something to keep an eye on for next summer, because you may see more players going down that route. But just on Chelsea, Chris, in this game, look, they look very impressive against West Ham, but as this is, we'll learn more about Chelsea as the season goes on. I thought they weren't great against Palace at home, and I think they were very fortunate to beat Fulham. So do you think they're still, you mentioned a few weeks ago that there's whispers of Chelsea being title contenders. I still think we're short. I think they're going to be competing for a Champions League spot, but I don't really see them as title contenders. And this game, I think Brentford on the lights will make it difficult. I think Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher said that they want their favourite game, their favourite stadium to go to for a night game on Sky is Brentford. So you know what Chelsea's going to be in for there. Like you pointed out, there's been a lot of draws between these two teams, a lot of uneventful games between these two teams. And I kind of see it being a very similar game, but I'm just going to go with Chelsea, Chris, 1-0.
1-0. Okay. Right. The last 2 games are the Sunday games. So Burnley against...
What did you go for?
3-1 Chelsea.
3-1 Chelsea.
Yeah. So, Burnley take on Liverpool. Liverpool have won 3 out of 3, beating Bournemouth 4-2 at Anfield, beating Newcastle 3-2 at St James's, and most recently, you mentioned that stunning free kick from Szoboszlai, beating Arsenal 1-0 at Anfield. Burnley, of course, lost to Tottenham. They beat Sunderland, and they lost against Manchester United. Should Liverpool just be handed the league title now, with Isak now signed?
I think in regards to this game, Burnley's only hope is if Liverpool's bus breaks down on the way to the game. I just cannot see anything other than Liverpool steamrolling Burnley. I mean,
4-0.
4-0. I just think it'll be comfortable. I know I went with some big scores, so you can probably find another one coming here. But look, Liverpool are a phenomenon at the minute. I mean, I think if they had got Gahey over the line, Chris, I think it would have been nailed on, to be totally honest. I think they're a bit short at centre half. If anything was to happen to Van Dijk or Konate, and I know if there's Liverpool fans watching, Van Dijk's injury record is impeccable, a bit like Salah's, but freak injuries can happen. I think if they were to lose Van Dijk for a period of time, and look, Van Dijk would have been a big loss anyway because he's a fantastic defender. But I think if you have Gahey and Konate, you've got a solid pair in there. You know, Gomez has had his injury problems. You know, and they've signed they are centre halves, a very young centre half, a bit like Viskovic, who we've signed. So they haven't really got a lot of experience if Van Dijk or Konate gets injured. And that will be the one worry, and that'll be what the likes of Arsenal and all our teams, Man City, will be looking at, that if they get any injuries at the back, that'll be our opportunity. But like you mentioned, the depth of attack and talent they have, I mean, it's hard to believe that Florian Wirtz hasn't really got started yet. You know, they haven't even needed him because they've got so much power up front. Salah's not really got going yet, but Ekatike started like a house on fire. Like you mentioned, they still have to bring Isak in. Cody Gakpo's a solid goal scorer. They've got goals from midfield and the likes of Szoboszlai. Gravenberch has only returned from his suspension in the last couple of games. So look, Liverpool have so much firepower and so much strength in that midfield that it's going to be difficult. It's hard. You look at games, Chris, and you think they beat Arsenal at home, right? You look at how many teams that are going to be able to take points off Liverpool. That'll be the worry that Arsenal and Man City have. If we can't take points off them, who's going to do it? Now they have looked vulnerable against the likes of Bournemouth and Newcastle, but look, they're good sides as well. I just don't see Burnley on that level, and I know Burnley. They probably should have got something at Old Trafford. They're very unfortunate not to walk away with anything. But Chris, Man United and Liverpool are in different stratospheres at the moment. This is a different kind of level that Burnley are going to face, and I just don't see any other. Look, this is a free hit for Burnley. If they lose this game, it's not going to make any difference to their season. But I just think Liverpool are going to be too strong.
I think when you look over the years of the teams that have won the Premier League, it's about moments. And when you watch that game, Liverpool v Arsenal at Anfield before the international break, that special moment, that free kick, those sorts of games, that sort of win, it wins you the title.
And the week before, Chris, the youngster come on and scored a 99th minute winner against Newcastle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's moments like that, and when you look at it,
the boy that they couldn't even get a game, didn't even get registered for the squad, Chiesa, gets a winner against Bournemouth. So they've had 3 big moments in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah. As I said, I think Liverpool are going to win this one 4-0. Burnley have lost 14 of their 18 Premier League matches against Liverpool, winning only 2, drawing 2, including each of their last 5 in a row since a 1-0 win at Anfield in January 2021. What are you going for, Gareth? I'm expecting a big scoreline from you again then.
Not as big as some of the others. 3-0 Liverpool.
3-0, okay. Right, so the last one that we've got to discuss is the Manchester derby, Manchester City v Manchester United at 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. Both teams need a win. City are in 13th. Manchester United are in 9th. City only have 3 points out of the first 3 games. Manchester United have 4. Manchester United, of course, have changed their goalkeeper. Onana has gone out the door. Gareth, let me ask you about that situation with Onana. It just seems a really weird situation at Manchester United. And when you look, and I know you and I, both on and off camera, have spoken about the recruitment of Manchester United over the last couple of years. They've spent so much money. And when they've sold or offloaded some of these players, they haven't got much money for them. And we've spoken about Amorim as well. Is he going to be the Manchester United manager at the end of the season, do you think?
I think at the minute, Ruben Amorim will be taking it in blocks, Chris. Can he get to the next international break? Then can he get to the 3rd international break? And then can he get to maybe Christmas time? Because, we spoke about it, Chris, before the game against Burnley, that it was a must-win. But we also said that, after the Grimsby game, it was really important that they come out and put a performance on. And let's be honest, they fell over the line with a late penalty, and Burnley had a goal chalked off in the game and missed opportunities. And look, that'll be the worry for United, that Burnley, who, let's be honest, didn't really lay a glove on Spurs. They gave United a lot of problems. Grimsby gave United a lot of problems. Now, I know Man City, we're going to speak about them, and it's not been a great start to the season for them. But my worry for United fans, and I've spoke to some United fans because they're obviously a very popular team over in Ireland here, is they go into any game at the moment, United fans fearing the opposition. I think that's it doesn't matter if they're playing League 2, League 1, Championship, a poor team in Europe. They don't really fancy themselves, and I think that's a massive issue when you're Man United. They should be going, well, this is Man United here. This is going to be a tough afternoon, where I think a lot of teams look forward to playing Man United now. And I think because Ruben Amorim's so rigid and so unwilling to adapt his formation, they're a very easy team to prepare for. Of course, they've got good players like Mbeumo have come on the door and he started to score goals, and Cunha, but the actual shape of the team and how they set up doesn't change from week to week. And I think a lot of teams can spot their vulnerabilities. The goalkeeper was a massive issue. Whatever one that played, whether it was Bender or Onana, the defence lacks pace. At times you're getting caught out with their fullbacks high up, the 2 wing backs high up the pitch, a lack of mobility in midfield with Casemiro. There was a whole host of problems, and of course, scoring goals was another one. Now, they hadn't scored a goal from open play up until that in the league, up until that Burnley game. But again, they needed a Bruno Fernandes penalty to get them over the line. So I think there's still a lot of question marks around Ruben Amorim, around Man United. Some of Ruben Amorim's behaviour, it's actually got worse this season than it was last year. The Grimsby, how he watched the penalties was very concerning. His behaviour on the touchline against Burnley, he just looks like really, really, the pressure really seems to be getting to him. And I just worry for him that a few more results, and I just think the whole fan base might turn, because I think, although we come in last season and he wanted to wait until the summer, United, don't forget last season, it was a disaster. The league form was shocking, losing the Europa League final to Spurs. And the way the season has started, it doesn't look like things are going to get much better. Now, they did beat Man City away last year, and Man City have had some trouble in Manchester derbies in recent years, even when they were at their best. So I think it'll be a very intriguing game. And look, it's a game that both managers, not in terms of Pep's security, but I don't think Man City won't want to lose 3 straight games. I think there'll be quite a lot of question marks if they do, especially against this United team who've been just beaten by Grimsby before the international break. So I think there's a lot of jeopardy in this game, Chris. And if Man City if Liverpool go to Burnley, which we expect to do in 1, if United were to go there and get a result, Man City are 9 points behind Liverpool already. And you just struggle to see how they would overturn that.
As Gareth mentioned there, in December 24, Manchester City lost 2-1 at home against Manchester United, and then in the return fixture at Old Trafford, they drew 0-0 on the 6th of April 2025. Now, Manchester City have won 5 of their last 8 Premier League matches against Manchester United, drawing 1 and losing 2, though they failed to win either game last season, as I just mentioned. Gareth also rightly said that Manchester City have lost their last 2 Premier League matches. Now, on the opening weekend, they went to Molineux, beating Wolves 4-0, and then lost 2-0 at home to Spurs. And then last time out, losing 2-1 away at Brighton. When you spoke about Ruben Amorim there, about that Grimsby game, of course, Gareth, you're a football coach. Do you ever sit there with those little pieces with the... with the tactics?
You know what? I've never seen anyone do it, and the rain is absolutely lashing down. I mean, it was dropping off his hair and everything onto the thing. How you could see anything, because it was quite like musty and foggy as well. It just looked like a proper, Sunday league sort of event. And I don't know.
Is that a no then?
No, definitely not. I mean, look, I think there's going to be really testing times ahead for Ruben Amorim. But look, we'll finish off, Chris, talking about Man City, because it does, like you pointed out, that 4-0 one against Wolves, it does seem like such a long time ago now, because a lot of people were saying, Man City are back. Man City are going to be strong this year. Liverpool are going to have 2 challengers in the form of Arsenal and a rejuvenated Man City. But look, you mentioned about the long throw returning there, and is that because people are fed up a copy and Pep? I think one of the biggest issues, Chris, that Pep has as well is he is quite stubborn, and we've seen that with the new goalkeeper. Spurs got a goal against them, and I think Man City, like we've said, are one of those teams, Chris, when they fall behind, they don't seem to be able to change their tactics to get back into the game. And look, that's the second year in a row as well where they've won 1-0 up at Brighton and lost. And I think a bit like, obviously not as drastic as Man United, but I do think a lot of clubs have lost that fear factor that Man City possessed a few years ago when they were winning everything. I think a lot of teams now go on to games against Man City feeling like they can get goals against them, can counterattack them, can get goals at set pieces against them. And I think one of the massive issues that Man City have missed over the recent seasons is they've never really replaced Mahrez and Raheem Sterling in their prime and the likes of Sané. I think Doku's a very dynamic player that can beat players, but the end product isn't there. I think Savinho's obviously injured, but whilst he looks easy on the eye, he hasn't really put the output up that Riyad Mahrez was putting up. Gundogan's moved on, who was a big source of goals. So there's a lot of pressure on Erling Haaland. Jesus is another player that could deputise for Haaland. He's moved on and deputised for Aguero. I don't think the players that Man City have brought on in that attacking area, with the exception being Haaland, are anywhere near the level of the players that they lost a few years ago who have moved on. Obviously, they're older and they're past their best. And I think when Man City get in the areas now against those teams, they don't have that same quality they had. So Man City are definitely not as strong as they have been in previous seasons. The last couple of seasons, based on what I've seen, Chris, they're going to be a team that's maybe fighting for top 4. I don't see them in the same breath as Liverpool at the moment, or even Arsenal.
Gareth, what's your score prediction for this one?
tricky one. I think this is possibly the most difficult game to call all weekend because Man City are becoming quite inconsistent and quite hard to predict. You know, we've seen them go through spells last year where they looked good and then all of a sudden they had a bad result and they went on a bad run. You don't know what you're going to get with Man City. If it's Man City at their best, I think they beat Man United quite convincingly. United are another team who have been very poor, but they did go to Man City and won last year. They drew away at Anfield. They beat Arsenal in the FA Cup away. So they have got a big performance on them. Difficult one to call, Chris. But I watched a bit of Norway, the highlights of the Norway game, and Erling Haaland scored 5 goals. So he looks like he's going to be sharp, and he may be the difference, Chris. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Man City 1.
That's exactly what I've gone for. 2-1. Right, I'm going to end with a quiz question for you here because we mentioned there Donnarumma should be making his debut for Manchester City. Man United have got a new goalkeeper as well, so 2 goalkeepers could be making their debuts. How many times since the Premier League started in '92 do you think this has happened? Of 2 goalkeepers on both sides have made their debut?
4.
It's only happened twice. When Forest played Spurs in '93 and when Charlton played Liverpool in 2007. So this could be the 3rd time that it happens in Premier League history. Gareth, I'm going to ask you a final question. At this stage, who's going to win the Premier League?
I think it's difficult to see past Liverpool at the moment. I think the only hope for the likes of Arsenal, if Man City can get their act together, and if there's a surprise package, I'd love that to be Spurs, get their hat in the ring. But I just think Liverpool have too many guns up front, and if barring injuries, they're going to outscore. They're going to. I think we've seen that Chris Newton says this season. You know, they scored 4 against Bournemouth, 3 against Newcastle. Even in games they found difficulty, they've got so many options. And like I say, the likes of Salah hasn't even started yet, and Isak's only come on the door. Last season's 2 top goal scorers. If they repeat that, there's 55 goals. I think so. I mean, that is going to be difficult to compete with. I think Liverpool first, Arsenal second, Man City third, and I'm going to go for Spurs in 4th.
I'm going to keep asking you this question every show, and let's see how you change it week by week or month by month. That'd be interesting.
I've already changed Chelsea, or I've already changed, Man City and Arsenal. I had Man City second and Arsenal third, but changed my mind already.
That's why I love these shows. Gareth, always great to talk to you. And as we know, we could talk about the Premier League and Spurs for hours upon end. So thank you so much for joining me. Have a great weekend, and we will see you on the next one. Before you do go, tell everyone what you're up to at the moment and where can people find you.
Thanks very much, Chris. Always great to come on and talk about the Premier League weekend. Can I get you in the mood now? It'll get me through Friday tomorrow at work, and knowing that there's a great game to start the weekend, and Big Ange is back in the helm at Forest, and I think that's just a brilliant. I mean, TNT probably can't believe their luck that Big Ange has walked in the door, because I think that just makes everyone want to watch that game even more on Saturday. So, brilliant way to start the weekend, and I hope Big Ange does it. It'd be great. Big Ange, well, I mean, it would be so. I mean, everyone's writing them off. I mean, it'd be great to go to the Emirates and get a 1. So, I mean, from all the Spurs family, Ange, we're fully behind you this weekend. Chris, you can find me on at their Twitter at below there. Usually Spurs talk on that. You can find me obviously on the Spurs Chat podcast quite a lot. Love being on, love talking Spurs, love talking Premier League. My football season actually starts this weekend. So back to the coaching. Season starts, the kids are ready. And look forward to that on Saturday morning now.
Well, best of luck to you and the team, Gareth, for the weekend. Best of luck to Ange Postecoglou at the Emirates, as we said. And best of luck to Thomas Frank and the Tottenham Hotspur team and squad. So let's hope that we can get another 3 points in the Premier League, keep climbing up that Premier League table, because our schedule at Tottenham is going to be pretty gruesome in the next couple of months. You know, games are coming thick and fast. So we know that he is going to have to rotate the squad very, very well. Gareth, thanks so much. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. And remember to put your score predictions in as well, whether you're watching this live or on a audio platform or on a recording. So put your score predictions in the comment section below, just for a bit of fun. And stay safe and well. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon. Come on, you Spurs.
Bye.